Hello, everyone. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you, as always, for listening to our content. But for more in-depth coverage on the Indiana Hoosiers football, basketball, and recruiting news, go to thehoosier.com on 3. Now with On 3 and great national writers like Ari Wasserman, Andy Staples, and Steve Wiltfong for football, Pete Nakos, J.B. Shaw, and Joe Tipton's constantly breaking stories on the basketball side. And the local coverage from Alec, Lasley, Kyler Staley, and Zach Browning. You can catch something new every day at thehoosier.com. Go there. Sign up today.
Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by the Hard Truth Distilling Company in Brown County, Indiana.
So for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world.
Touchdown, Indy. Woo! IU, America. They got a football team now.
It's pretty simple. I win. Google me.
You know that I'm the cream of the crop.
Oh. Now, from the Hard Truth Studios, here's Jim Coyle.
Welcome back to the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios on this It's so Friday. But Alec Lasley from thehoosier.com joined us, so that makes it a lot better already. How are you doing, brother?
Doing well. How are you doing?
If I was any better, I would be Alec Lasley.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
But I'm not. I'm here talking to you.
Just playing with some toys that we've been messing with. Man, a lot has been going on for IU, both on the football and basketball side of things. These are just been nice additions that they need, additions that they're looking for to strategic. They've been strategic additions with the needs on defense being specific for Brian Haynes on the defensive line. And he has added a couple of pieces there this week that look to be just kind of plug and play, with the former teammate of CJ West coming in from Kent State, and then adding the Maryland linebacker who was actually going to play down, which that has to be exciting for Brian Haynes to have a guy that has that kind of athletic ability now going to be down on the line. Maybe that gives Indiana a much more rushing presence, ability to get to the quarterback. And I talk all the time about the anchor Indiana has right up the middle there with Mikael Kamara, an All-American on the line. And then you've got Eden Fisher at linebacker and D'Angelo Pons in the backfield. And they've got a great defensive backfield overall. Man, Indiana football is this upcoming season has to be the greatest position Indiana football has ever been in the history of its program, in my estimation. We saw what they did last year. We know what they lost, but we know what they've added. Personally, I think that the team itself is going to be better overall this year. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have a better record, because the schedule is a little more difficult with those 3 tough road games. But I still think that they can wind up being 10-2 and making a return trip to the college football playoffs. Offensively, they've added some great pieces as well. In the backfield, Roman Hemby, Lee Beebe from UAB. Nothing bigger than Fernando Mendoza, who is probably, there's no drop off. And as a matter of fact, I think it's going to bring a little something because he has some mobility, whether that's just keeping plays alive or turning nothing into something. Not as a knock on Curtis Rourke. Hell, he was hurt. He was a man's man playing the way he did last year. But I still think that overall, this team is going to be better at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I think it was last week, right? The probably more consistent playmakers and the pop that they have on both sides of the ball. But yeah, getting Kellen Wyatt, the Maryland transfer, I think was a pretty underrated signing this week. And then Daly as well, obviously from Kent State, the CJ West teammate that you were mentioning before at the top there. So those are two tremendous additions that I think are going to go a bit underrated in the portal cycle, right? I mean, Indiana's now done a phenomenal job just in one season with creating a lot of momentum on defensive line transfers and defensive line just production. And you obviously see what they did with CJ West. You see what they obviously have done over the past couple of years with this staff with Kamara. Obviously, James Carpenter, phenomenal defensive lineman as well. And then you throw in, what they potentially could do with Stephen Daly and then Kellen Wyatt, two, like I said, pretty underrated pass rushers. And that was one aspect that this defense was missing going into the spring. And one aspect that this defense really needed to improve on was adding one or two pieces along the defensive line. Those two combined for 7 sacks last year. Kellen Wyatt, a very versatile edge rusher who's going to be playing again more on the outside for Indiana and more in that edge position. But had, I think it was 7 tackles for loss last year and a really big disruptor when it comes to getting downhill and attacking the backfield. And you just didn't have that presence, again, outside of Mikel Kamara. You didn't really have that presence from this group going into the summer. And so what they were able to do this past week was, I think, a very, very positive step in the right direction. Still need to shore up a few things probably with the addition of maybe a linebacker or two just for some depth purposes. But they've done a phenomenal job up to this point. And then I think you turn to the offensive side and you try to get one more pass catcher, whether that be a tight end or some sort of slot wide receiver. That's probably the only other position that you really look at and say, we really need to cross off something on our to-do list here for the Indiana staff. But outside of that, I mean, they had obviously the injury to Tyler Morris. They have some kind of nagging injuries to a lot of guys, but once again, their core pieces, they got out of spring relatively healthy. Obviously last year they were healthy throughout the majority, if not the entire season. But that's going to be the crucial part now going into the summer, especially if they don't pick up one or two more pieces in those core positions. They really need to make sure they make it into the fall extremely healthy because, again, at that pass catching position, I just don't think you can rely on EJ Williams to be a consistent threat just with all the injury issues that he's had over the past 2 years. So all in all, I mean, I think Indiana staff has to be excited about where they're at. I think this team is probably going to be a little bit ahead of where they were to begin last year, and especially on the defensive side, which is a scary thought probably for a lot of opposing teams because of how dominant they were for the majority of the 2024 year. But I think this offense is going to put on even more of a show, and I think you're going to see these running backs, all three of them, Kalen Black, BB, and then Roman Hemby, as guys who are very consistent in the pass catching game, which is going to open up a lot more for this offense, year 2 under Mike Shanahan here in Bloomington.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I'm looking forward to seeing because the defense had specific needs, and they have basically kind of filled those needs with the types of players that were in them. And a year ago, with all of the doubts that people had, so I don't know if these guys, I don't know that Aiden Fisher can play in the Big Ten. Yeah, no, you're right. He couldn't. He's an All-American. Mikel Kamara, the same thing. Yeah, all these guys. That it's so funny. I mean, it's the same with basketball right now. You see all these guys coming in from Elon and all these other teams, and I'm sure people are thinking, "Wow, dude, you got to get over that. You have to forget all of that stuff." But Indiana is, like you said, they've added those pieces, and now there's yet another piece that might fall today. Indiana looking for a savage. Jacob Savage out of Union, Kentucky, a linebacker, is going to announce his commitment today. And Steve Wiltfong, On3's vice president of recruiting and transfer portal, likes where Indiana sits in this recruitment.
Yeah, announcing at 2:45 later on this afternoon. So it's looks like it's come down to Indiana, Michigan State, Purdue, Louisville have kind of been the top four there for the last couple of months. But Indiana has definitely done a phenomenal job, especially over the last kind of month and a half. He's been on campus numerous times. Was back there earlier this month as well. Coming off the heels of getting Rodney White defensive line commitment in the 2026 class. Obviously, they got Henry Ollinger last week, who's going to be playing at the linebacker position, the 4-star running back who is going to make that transition to the linebacking room. So if you're able to add Jacob Savage to that, right, that's a pretty good start to your core defensively. And it's interesting. I was talking to a couple people who were a little bit not concerned, but a little bit taken back at potentially the slow start in the 2026 class for Indiana. But not to say that this is what's going to be the norm for Indiana moving forward, but I think because of all the success they've had now just in one season, and with the assumption, right, that they'll have success with a lot of individual players this year as well, I think you're going to see a lot more of those top and underrated mid-major players and even high major players coming to Indiana to really bridge that gap, and may only have 1 year of eligibility. But I think Indiana is going to become a really big recruiting ground for those transfers who can really step in and produce right away. And so I don't know that there's going to be a huge need for a lot of they may be redshirt freshmen or even true sophomores, whatever the case may be, to come in and produce in year 1.5, year 2. I think you're going to see a lot of much more of an older group of guys consistently for Indiana. But you're also going to see probably those core group of players who end up turning into potentially all Big Ten type players who wait their turn and are now watching behind guys who have been in the system a couple of years and have really good high level experience at the college level. I think it's going to be more of that kind of rotation when it comes to a recruiting aspect, where the portal is probably going to be 90% of this roster just because of the success that it's had, especially after you get out of this year, right, and you lose some of those key pieces of now Aiden Fisher, Mikel Kamara are going to be gone. You don't have that core group of James Madison guys anymore, but you still have a good core group of players who have now wanting to even come back to Indiana after transferring out, so that the culture is already going to be set. And I think what both coaches are doing here, Curt Cignetti and Darren DeVries, it's all about culture and it's all about fit. And they're not, they're targeting the best players, right? They're not, settling for not going after them, even if they don't land them, but they're also making sure that they check off, every single box that they need. And they're not really compromising anything in landing those players, because they want to make sure that they, check off every single box when it comes to culture and identity and fit before, landing a player like that.
Yeah. And again, I just say, look at last year. There was so many questions about what Curt Cignetti was putting together. And you want to talk about the answer being an iron fist. That's exactly what it was. And they're continuing to go back to the same well and do the same things because it worked, and it worked very, very well. It also allowed Indiana to hold on to so many of these guys. You didn't see very many IU guys hit the portal. Burris, one of the few valuable members this past season. You saw Kalel Benson come back from the portal, which is huge. But also you mentioned, those JMU guys, they're not having to instill this system now. I mean, the new guys, it's obviously new for them, but the core, it's already there. You're just picking up where you left off, and they left off in a really, really good place. Going to Pro Day this year and watching Fernando Mendoza throw the ball, that dude looks like he is in lockstep right now. He can throw it deep. He's got mobility. He has got a cannon on him. Those little 20-yard passes, if you're a receiver, you better be ready, and you better catch it with your hands. Otherwise, it's going to leave a mark on you. And man, they just look like they're doing all of the right things ahead of this season.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we heard, I believe it was Carter Smith, talk about it earlier this spring. Talk really about how they need to make sure that they keep the standard high and the level of expectations high. And he said it was interesting that he talked about some of the newcomers that came in that saw the success last year and just kind of automatically assumed that it would be that case this year as well, and kind of came in with a little bit too much confidence or cockiness. So I think even having, that type of player-led leadership from a group that, again, has not seen success in quite some time, especially from the Indiana perspective, right? But you have that core group of guys from JMU who have seen success year in and year out in the Curt Cignetti system, and they know what to expect, and they know how to build on that success and make it very sustainable. I think that's the very important part. But now you have a couple guys, right, who after this season, when you do lose a good core group of those JMU guys, probably the last bit of what came over from last year, you now have a very still good core group of Indiana-born players here from the system that came in with Cignetti that didn't know him from JMU, that now know what the identity needs to be, what the standard needs to be, and what the culture is, to be able to obviously, be that bridge from the group of guys who did overlap with the JMU players and now the newcomers over the next year or so who are not going to have any of that overlap with that JMU culture. So it's going to be very, very critical for guys like Carter Smith and some of the other ones who, have the ability to play with the JMU players, and then obviously moving forward without them to really be that bridge and that gap from kind of the first bit of culture setting experiences in Bloomington to what's going to be in the next, year and 2 years when most of those JMU guys are gone.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier about Jacob Savage, and I don't know if it's Savage or Savage, like the cologne. I'm going to go with Savage. If you're a football player and it's spelled that way, you got to be a Savage, baby. But he's from Union, Kentucky, and just like in basketball, not a lot of recruiting from the state of Kentucky, which is odd, ironic. I don't think there's any true reason for that, but he's it's a 95% prediction to Indiana on him. So Brian Haynes has done an outstanding job getting the kinds of guys that he wants, and he knows what he wants.
Yeah, I mean, between Brian Haynes, between Curt Cignetti, again, they have a great eye for talent. They know, specifically what fits from a personnel standpoint. And so it's never been one about, stars or potential. He talked about this. I think both of them did, but specifically Curt Cignetti did when kind of the first couple months on the job last year, when a lot of people, I don't want to say were concerned, but they had doubts about whether these, 0-star, 1-star, 2-star recruits could, come from JMU or come from the mid-major level and produce right away. And, his mantra was, production over potential, right? And that's all that he looks for. He can mold people into, producing at this level. But if you've never produced before, then he doesn't think that you're the right fit, right? He wants to go after guys who have put up big numbers, who have been successful, who have shown that they have an ability to either rush the quarterback or get out in open space and make plays, or be able to, match up one-on-one on the outside with a star wideout. A lot of these big 5-star, 4-star players who enter the transfer portal year in and year out are guys who, again, have that P word, that potential, but never really live up to it. And that's the biggest thing with this staff is they don't get locked into, the big sexy names that may be out there on the open market. They look for those guys who have produced, who have shown the ability to do exactly what they want, and who are guys who can come in and produce right away. And that's the biggest thing. No matter what position you're at, they're going to look for that production, and they're going to go with production, 10 times out of 10 before they look at a guy with potential and say, hey, we need you to come in and produce right away, because they just haven't done that up to that level yet.
Yeah, they certainly have, and we'll see how that commitment turns out today, and if things continue to go Indiana's way. Alec Lasley from the Hoosier.com with us right now. And before I forget, you guys still have a great special going on there. And if you're not a subscriber to the Hoosier.com, you're missing out on big time content every day, as there are so many stories coming out, and the Hoosier.com is on top of it, if not breaking many of these. What's the special you guys got going there, Alec?
Yeah, still just $1 for the first month, and then 50% off the rest of the year, the rest of your first year. So depending when you sign up, right, that's 12 months of an extra 50% off with all the content from the national perspective all the way down to the nitty gritty aspects of Indiana football and basketball. So definitely make sure to take advantage of that.
We've got lots more coming up. When we return, we're going to talk some hoops with Alec Lasley from the Hoosier.com. Hello, everyone. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you, as always, for listening to our content. But for more in-depth coverage on the Indiana Hoosiers football, basketball, and recruiting news, go to thehoosier.com on 3. Now with On 3, and great national writers like Ari Wasserman, Andy Staples, and Steve Wiltfong for football, Pete Nakos, J.B. Shaw, and Joe Tipton's constantly breaking stories on the basketball side. And the local coverage from Alec Lasley, Kyler Staley, and Zach Browning. You can catch something new every day at thehoosier.com. Go there, sign up today.